It was a description of her. It was like point by point, even things that are like quite nuanced, loves to dance.
No way.
And she was a professional dancer. It's
No
like
way.
really point by point, every single characteristic and more was fulfilled. It was a beautiful confirmation of the power of intention.
And you're sure that's not just because you're like a good-looking, intelligent guy with lots going for you?
I mean, I'm going to give the credit to the manifestation for sure.
Hey there, seekers. Before we get into today's episode, I've got a small favor that could make a huge difference. If you find value here and think others could benefit too, the best way to help spread the word is to scroll down and leave us a quick review, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. It only takes a moment and it helps us reach more people striving to unlock their potential. Plus, you might even get some good karma. Welcome to The Self You Seek, a podcast dedicated to helping you unlock your fullest potential through self-actualization, mental optimization, and transformative experiences. I'm Dr. Brendan Doherty, a traditionally trained psychiatrist who has come to realize that while psychiatry offers powerful tools, there's often something more needed to help people truly thrive. In this podcast, we'll explore evidence-based approaches alongside ancient wisdom and modern transformative experiences that push beyond the boundaries of conventional mental health care. Whether grounded in science or supported by compelling anecdotal evidence, these insights and discussions are all worthy of exploration. Join me as we navigate the path towards unlocking your potential and transforming your well-being. And a quick reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute for personalized medical advice. Always consult with a licensed healthcare or mental health professional if you're uncertain or need guidance. This podcast also does not represent the views of any business or health service I'm associated with. And now for the show. Welcome to the next episode of The Self You Seek. Today we have Dr. Manish Plaha, and Manish is a practicing medical doctor who is passionate about holistic well-being with a special focus on embodiment through meditation. He aims to harmonize the human energy field as a pathway to optimum mental, physical, and emotional health. Now, I want to dive straight into this, but firstly, it's lovely to have you here. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We've been trying to connect for maybe 6 months or something. And yeah, it's really excited to have this conversation because we have a similar background in that we're both doctors and we're both in Bali doing different stuff and have maybe an interest in medicine and also outside of medicine. So it's lovely to connect with a like-minded person. So welcome. And Manish, in your intro, he aims to harmonize the human energy field as a pathway to optimum mental, physical, and emotional health. Now, that's not a sentence that many doctors are going to be like, oh, yeah, like that makes sense to me. You know, that
What is an energy field?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I think it's an excellent place to start. Tell us how you got into it, why that, and what is that?
So I think the most grounded way to express this is when we start thinking about the nervous system. And so we are having impulses running through our nervous system that's generating a current. Our heartbeat is creating an electromagnetic field, and our brain waves are also creating a field. So these are fields of energy that we're able to record, measure, and experience. And these fields are also detectable between people. So as we sit here and as we have these impulses running through us, we'll be able to receive information subconsciously. And so that information is related to how the energy is flowing through our body. It's related to what thoughts are going through the mind. And so when we start to learn a little bit more about connecting with the inner world, with the sensations in the body, learning how to connect with the function of the nervous system and how to observe the mind, we can start to transform this energy field at our will, and that can have impacts on how we experience life. And so my passion has been focused on this since going into a really challenging place. And that was as a result of not managing my emotions, working in the emergency department, being under high pressure and high stress, not knowing how to really rest and take care of my emotional and psychological needs. And then it's actually a beautiful gift because sometimes when you go really far over to one side, you can discover what it feels like to not be like that. And it's the difference that makes you realize the value of what it is that you're doing. So I just started initially practicing mindfulness meditation and just creating space where I was being present with the thoughts that were going on in my mind. It created such a contrast that made me not want to stop to take care of my mental and emotional well-being. And so I haven't stopped.
Become part of your life and what you show other people now, right?
Absolutely. I just see it kind of like having a shower or brushing your teeth. You do these things every day to take care of your hygiene. And so I see also practices like meditation or breath work to be energetic hygiene.
Mhm.
And so when I do that and start the day in that way, the nature and the quality of my thoughts will be different and the way that I'm relating to them will be different. And because of that difference, my energetic hygiene, the way energy is flowing through my body, will be different. And I feel like that creates more harmony in my life.
Love that. Now, I always feel like I need to get this out of the way first because there's going to be some people that completely like resonate with what you're saying. And there's going to be other people that are going to be like, well, it's kind of, woo woo talk, or we don't actually know that's happening, or, what is that? Particularly those from a more scientific, like left brain background. Can you just like go into sort of the evidence or you mentioned that we can measure the electromagnetic fields and we can measure energy in some ways. And can you talk to that a little bit about where, like, how do we know this stuff actually exists?
Yeah. So, I mean, we can measure our brain waves and we can do that with an EEG, an electroencephalogram. And so when we can see those brain waves, we can see how and which states of function the brain is in. So higher frequency and lower frequency, and it's very easy to measure. And another thing that's really powerful is when we look at the way that the heart is beating and the variability between beats. So the heart rate variability is correlated with the way that our nervous system is functioning. And so when we start to understand this correlation, we can tell how specific practices and exercises are creating harmony and what is creating disharmony. And so then we can then correlate that to emotional well-being because people are able to give us their experiences of what's happening inside of their body. There are other more sophisticated measures of measuring the human biofield, but just very straightforward with no kind of confusion or no contestation of actually the value of these studies. EEGs and heart rate variability are the gold standard that I'm aware of that we can really know what's going on inside another person.
Mm. Indeed. And you also mentioned around that we're perhaps subconsciously communicating, or at least in our fields are interacting with each other. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, so because we're creating this biofield, this beat of magnetic information and electrical information that's going from the brain and into the heart, we're then able to receive and perceive that. So there was one study that really stood out for me, and it was done by the Heart Math Institute. And this was not from person to person. This study was actually looking at people being able to receive information and seeing how the heart was responding to that. So they had a laptop that was showing images. And on that laptop, some of those images would be distressing. And they were measuring the brain waves and they were measuring the heart rate variability. And they were looking to see at what point did the brain react to those images and at what point did the heart react to those images. And what they were able to detect was that the heart rate variability decelerates when you see something distressing. And so that's what they are aware of when someone goes through that distress. But the changes in the heart happened milliseconds before the image was shown on the screen. So it was heart rate variability changes, distressing images appear on the screen, and then the brain waves respond. So it's actually showing that the heart rate variability and the heart is connected to a field of information that is outside of time. So for me, seeing the evidence of that in this study, it validated experiences that I've had in my own life where I've been with other people and I've been able to feel and receive emotional information inside of my body and then realize that I'm not experiencing that emotion in this moment. I feel sadness. Where's that coming from? Because my mind isn't sad. My body isn't sad. And then I realized that someone I'm close to is going through something challenging. And so having experiences like this time after time after time has really validated some of these more woo-woo ideas that some people, and even me 15 years ago, would have laughed at.
Yeah, so just so I get it straight, in that study, which sounds extremely interesting, by the way, you're suggesting that before the image comes up on the screen, there's something that's being transmitted by, say, the computer or whatever it is that's bringing that up, that the body is responding to before it actually processes the vision of that distressing image.
Before even the image has appeared on the screen. So it would be really great that any of these kinds of studies that we talk about that we can somehow link to. And
Yeah, please. Yeah,
so
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, we'll collate them and have them all available so people can actually look and read into these themselves.
Yeah,
and see the value of these studies as well.
Love to do that.
My take on it is that we live in a universe which contains a field of information that's non-local, it's out of time, and that the heart has an ability to connect to that field of information. So I would call that intuition, the ability for us to know something that wouldn't be possible if we were only looking at our five senses and taking a very left-brained approach of reality. And what I feel so excited about in my own life and where I'm choosing to go with my own personal journey of personal development and spiritual development is to discover what is possible and to let go of this really closed box that I created for myself based on the information I was taught in medical school. It was really, this is how it is, and anything out of this, I'm going to reject because it just doesn't fit with this model of reality that I've created for myself. And there's freedom in letting go of that. Great freedom in letting go of that.
I resonate deeply with that because I have this background that's really scientific, and unless something all kind of is or feels rigidly proven, and of course nothing really is 100% proven, it's very hard for that part of my brain to let go and go, yeah, there's a quantum, electromagnetic field behind it that sort of has an intelligence and knows things and transmits things before we're aware of it. There's a part of me that really struggles to let that go, yet I've had these similar experiences too. It's amazing. And people will say, like, when they sit still and they tune into themselves, or even they emit an emotion that they want to, and then the corresponding event happens to them that equals that emotion. It happens time and time again. And yes, perhaps it's just all people imagining this stuff and coincidences. But when it starts happening to you a lot, like it feels a lot more than that. And there does seem to be increasing amounts of evidence showing that there is something more that we don't get. And one of those things that I've become aware of recently is near-death experiences, like where people literally have similar responses on the edge of death that we cannot explain, including things like talking to people that have already died, feeling like they're out of their body, looking down on themselves. They've literally catalogued these and studied them. There's professors studying them. And our usual forms of science can't account for that. So I guess I say this because I struggle with this internally, but it is lovely to see someone who seems to be, really embracing it, letting their experience affect them and responding to it and leaning into it, and instead of letting all the left brain thoughts win all the time. Yeah.
I'm kind of at this place now in my own personal journey where my understanding of my own experience is that the beliefs that we create are mirrored in the reality that we experience. So, as much as we're able to allow those beliefs to be malleable, the more life will provide us experiences to either support and reinforce those beliefs or to dissolve or invalidate them. And so, when we're open to being surprised by life and we let go of rigidity, we get to experience more and more of these serendipitous events. What I hold is that we have the capacity to experience a reality that's very different to what we currently do. And that is dictated by our collective human consciousness and what we choose to accept as possible as a species. And so my passion is supporting people into observing these beliefs, to deciding whether these beliefs are supportive or whether they're restrictive and harmful. And then once they've made that decision, to give them the tools to be able to reevaluate and replace those beliefs if they choose to do so.
It's lovely. And what method are you doing, or where did you get that from, or how are you doing that? Yeah.
So my favorite way of approaching this is with meditation. And so with meditation, what we can see is that when we think the same thoughts again and again, we are reinforcing neural pathways in the brain. And so those thoughts, those beliefs are being hardwired and are more easily accessible. And so the simple act of observing a thought when it comes up and not unconsciously buying into the story that it's telling you about your life will start the process of disempowering it. That can be challenging for people because those thought patterns that are really hardwired are also connected to chemicals that are released in the brain. And these chemicals called neuropeptides, they go into the body and they trigger emotions. And whether those emotions are positive or negative, we can still develop an addiction to having those thoughts and receiving those neuropeptides into our body and feeling a certain way. And so these cycles of thinking and feeling and acting continue because they're just habitual. So that process at the beginning just begins with choosing not to entertain those thought patterns they've been persistent for many years of your life and maybe even through your generations, that these psychological and emotional imprints can also have been things that your parents and grandparents and your ancestors have been navigating also based on experiences and beliefs and conditioning that does go through the ancestral lines.
Yeah. You brought up that word addiction, and, traditional thought is that addiction is really the realm of cigarettes and alcohol and other drugs, and maybe extending to, exercise or sex or whatever. But the more I hear about this, the more and experience the little habits in my own life that are difficult to release, it all just feels like we're constantly just in a state of addiction. Like the thoughts about what happens, if someone doesn't respond to a call, that the pattern that my thought pattern is an addiction. Like whether it's, they don't care, or, they're doing something else. The way your mind goes is really, it doesn't feel like a moment of free will. It feels like a moment of addiction. That same pathway has been repeated thousands of times, and here I am, as a almost 40-year-old going, it's the same thing that might have happened when I was 13. And unless you consciously make the effort to rewire that, you're just going to be addicted to those same thought patterns for the rest of your life.
You hit the nail on the head because it's really, when we start to understand that only a small percentage of our thoughts are conscious, of our behaviors are coming from our conscious mind, and the vast majority are coming from our subconscious mind,
Mm.
and that the subconscious is actually programmed in the first 7 years of your life. It's hardwired. When you're in those 7 years, you're in hypnosis. So the thoughts and the beliefs that you receive from your environment, and that's most likely your parents, about the world, about yourself, they then control the rest of your life, because they become the framework of reality that you choose to, the lens that you choose to see reality from. So if you believe that you'll never be rich, or if you believe that you have no ability to sing, or you have no creative talent, then those beliefs will prevent you from ever exploring things that could be your life purpose, could be the hidden gifts within you that would really give you purpose and satisfaction and passion to be alive.
Mm.
And that's what I find is it's really challenging, actually, to go through that and to inhibit yourself in many different ways based on what you believe is possible for you.
Yeah. It's also like when you talk like that and the possibilities that are there, it's very exciting. Like it's very inspirational. It's very kind of, oh, okay, if I can get myself out of that belief, maybe I can be whatever I want to be. There are, of course, limits to what we do, but I think people that they would have skepticism towards the idea that if we change the way we think, we change our life. Probably, yeah, again, the open mindedness is probably not there. And they're preventing themselves from at least significant shifts in their life. Like you may not be, if you imagine yourself as the number one singer in the world or the quarterback for the New York Jets or something, then yeah, you may not get that. But it doesn't mean that you can't be an excellent singer or a quarterback or play football for the first time or whatever it is. Yeah.
It's that process of, okay, well, I'll never be this level or be able to experience X, Y, and Z, that prevents people from even taking the first step to doing something that would bring them joy.
Exactly.
And it's about letting go of this expectation and perfectionism. And when we have within us this desire to explore something, whether that be singing or dancing or painting, it's a lot of the time creative blocks that who knows what that would evolve to be, because when you're really doing something from that pure passion, it connects you to flow state, it connects you to the present moment in such a way that you become a conduit for such incredible creativity.
Yeah, it's really lovely. What do you think? How do people go about this? Is it possible to make these changes by yourself, or do people need professional help, or how does it happen in real life? People are unlocking themselves.
I would say at the basic foundational level of this, just to maintain mental health, to start to become aware of what programs are actually running in your mind, a practice of mindfulness meditation is really helpful. It's starting off at 10 minutes a day, working up to 15 and then to 20 minutes a day, and just doing that in the morning as soon as you wake up, and for bonus points before you go to bed, would be really helpful, because you're taking those unconscious thoughts and you're bringing them into the conscious mind. And that's actually on its own incredibly powerful. Just bringing things into conscious awareness very often is what it takes to change them, because you know that they're there. There are obviously tools and techniques that I'm happy for us to go into as well. But those are more related to also transforming the sensations in the body and the feelings in the body. Because if we try to change 1,000 thoughts, we will experience some benefit. But if we change one feeling, it will correspondingly affect thousands of thoughts. So thoughts will trigger feelings. But if we can actually work with the feelings in the body, we will significantly have an impact on our subconscious mind, because the way to communicate with the subconscious is much more powerful to generate emotion than to rewrite it with affirmations, for example. That's a very common way of working with the subconscious. It's doing practices that involve reaffirming into the subconscious the opposite of what you are currently experiencing or what you would like to experience more of. And it works, but it's just not the most efficient way.
That's interesting. I never heard that before.
Yeah, this is why my passion is on embodiment, because it's actually about being in connection with the sensations in the body. And so being in the present moment involves feeling what's going on inside. And so when we're thinking, we're completely associated or very associated with the mental field. And that creates disconnection from the physical body. So learning how to be present with what's going on inside of us will keep us connected to the present moment, because the sensations are evolving from moment to moment. And then what we also gain as a gift from that process is a whole host of additional information from our environment. So like I'm talking to you about, like feeling someone else's emotions or being in nature and feeling incredibly connected to that field of nature, or also getting more information about you and your body, because the subconscious is communicating through feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. When you're talking about getting into a regular practice of some sort, I brought up a recent experience of mine where I started a particular type of meditation practice where I was, I guess, imagining myself in certain ways and opening up possibilities for the future. Before that, it had been just sort of like concentrating on numbers or breath or something like that. But what I didn't expect is that, first of all, things started to happen that I couldn't understand. But I just started to dream every night as well. I probably dreamt, but I wasn't remembering them. But I was getting these crazy vivid dreams almost every night. I started documenting them and things. I think maybe it showed at least the power of what this can do if you're doing it in the right way, or for you, that it was like activating the subconscious mind. It was creating stuff behind the scenes that I just, I still don't understand a lot of it, but it was extremely activating. And I feel, and unfortunately, life got really busy and I've lost that practice a little bit. I'm intending to get back into it because I just noticed how everything for a while became quite effortless as well. It felt like things were just happening without me necessarily doing it. Whereas my current point is that I feel like I'm kind of behind the eight ball trying to push everything. And I can tell you the other way is much how I'd much rather like to live. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely what I consistently seek to create in my own life, is this effortless action that comes from a regulated nervous system. And yeah, the dreams are a very powerful way for the subconscious to also communicate to us, and it does that through imagery. It's not directly communicating in a linear fashion. It has its own code that it communicates through dreams. And that can be a very powerful way to get into a better understanding of what the subconscious has available to discover.
Mm, 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 mm. Go on though. Tell us what's one of these techniques that you would use potentially.
Well, we can transform emotions within the body when we learn how to be with them. I definitely was not taught this when I grew up. I wasn't taught that emotions were something that I would, but were very welcome actually. And I think that kids are not really taught how to feel safe with the emotions as they arise. And so the first step is just to be in acceptance that something is coming up inside of you. And then to be able to feel it, to understand that it's not causing you any harm by being present in your body. And with that acceptance, with that presence, and that approach of gentleness, the emotion is actually able to have some space. Because when we are resisting it or condemning it, trying to make it go away, we actually confine it into a very tight ball, and it becomes more solid. And with that approach of gentleness, it starts to create a bit more space. It expands a little bit more in your body. And so once we have that space, we can use the breath to massage and to create even more space around it, because we have the ability to move our breath into different parts of our body. We can do that with our intention. So, for example, if we were to sit there and have our hands out and close our eyes and take deep breaths in and out and place our attention on our hands, we'd start to feel, in combination with the breath, some tingling that goes on. And we can do that in various parts of our body. And it's really powerful when we do that in the areas of our body where we're feeling emotion. So putting our hands on the area, the belly is a really common part where we feel a lot of stuff. It has as many, super large amount of neurons. And so we just breathe in and out of that area with our hand on that area of the body, and imagine that the breath is actually going in between those particles, those atoms of the emotion. And then from that space, we allow the emotion to fill the whole body. We allow it to go where it would like to go. So instead of resisting it and pushing it into this tight little container, we're actually giving it full reign to go anywhere. And the best way to do that is to connect to the sensation of the body as a whole. So we feel from the top of the head to the tips of the toes. And that's something that does take a little bit of practice. So when I teach this, I also teach the steps that lead up to it, starting with, first of all, how to be present with the body. Because if we're going through so many different thoughts that the emotion is usually connected to, we will perpetuate and will amplify the emotion, because it's that cycle that we're feeding. And then other things is about how to be in the body sensation as one. But that then enables the emotion space, even more space. So as we feel the sensation, as we feel the whole body, as we breathe, as we accept, it starts to dissolve. And this was life-changing for me. From going through many years where I was trying to numb emotions and push them away and distract myself, to realizing that actually there's an incredible amount of energy that's held in this space. And that by really caring for myself in that process, I can liberate that energy and I can actually utilize it in my life. So once we've processed the emotion, and this can take a few minutes, we can then cultivate an emotion in our body that's more in alignment with what we choose to experience. So imagine the emotion is insecurity, and I'm feeling insecure about something, and I've been with that feeling of insecurity. Imagine it's in my belly and it's been able to dissolve. And then I can just cultivate with my mind, with my attention, something that I'm proud of myself about, something that I've experienced in my life that has been a victory, something that generates confidence. And I allow myself to feel that emotion, because we can generate emotions that will also. So what I'm then doing is I've experienced this neural pathway of insecurity. It has its associated thoughts. It has its associated emotion. I've processed the emotion, and that emotion is very often connected to something that happened earlier in our life, very often in those first 7 years that we've spoken about. So what I do in my one-to-one sessions is I support my clients to actually go into those root experiences. But when we've then cultivated the opposite emotion, we have completely reprogrammed that pattern. We've, instead of saying, okay, I'm thinking and feeling a certain way, and I'm just going to continue that loop, we said, actually, it's safe for me to feel that way. You know what? I'm actually also a confident person, and I'm capable, independently doing that process, taking time every day to take a check of what's going on in our emotional, mental environment, processing things that may have accumulated in that day, we will realize our lives rapidly change.
Do you remember the moment when your life switched like that for the first time?
My life switched for the first time. Really, it was like 2 weeks after I first started meditating. I had a relationship that wasn't healthy for me. And it was showing me aspects of myself that really needed to be looked at. And after 2 or 3 weeks of practicing meditation, I realized that actually this focus on negativity that had been brought up inside of me as a result of the relationship dynamics were able to dissolve. And I was able to come back to peace, and I was able to focus on the things in my life that were really important. I mean, we talk about these serendipitous experiences. It was only a few weeks after that I was actually doing my examinations as a general practitioner. And in the middle of the night, someone broke into my house and stole the keys from my car and drove it away. So I woke up in the morning, my car was missing. And I just remember that there was a real difference in the way that I approached that situation. It was very focused and clear. The notes that I had been using to study were also in the car. So I was just like, okay, I have an exam in a week. I need to do something here. So I just did what I need to do, called the insurance, called the police, and then realized I just need to sit down and I need to study. And that, for me, was one of the experiences that really stands out for me, because I realized that there was a very different approach to how I was navigating something that was a significantly challenging experience.
Sounds like for starters, you was like dysregulated as well. Like you just operated from a place of calmness as opposed to chaos.
So obviously that was very early on in my exploration of all these different things. So what I was able to do was to really be able to have an ability to not be a victim to the mind. So it wasn't really able to unconsciously go into anger or rumination or into fear. And I was able to keep focused on what it was that on the outcome that I desired, which was to just commit to studying and to pass this exam. Now, what I feel is an even more beneficial place would be to also take the space to connect with the body and to feel the emotions of anger or frustration or stress or fear.
Mhm.
So that's something that I've now come to the understanding there's even more value there. When we honor actually all sides of the experience, yeah, at that stage it was mainly mental focus, but it was also really helpful because I managed to pass. So
Yeah, that's great. A wonderful story. It reminds me what you're talking about, that so much in life and even in some therapeutic techniques, we encourage the cessation of emotions. And it can't be healthy. You know, they're going to go, it's kind of like the physics laws that energy is preserved. That's going to go somewhere, right? An emotion is in many ways an energetic thing. And if we have a feeling or even, a thought that we don't want or something and we repress it, then it's not like it just goes away. Like maybe it goes away from your conscious mind, but it certainly sticks around somewhere. And I think what you're describing is like a leaning into it and understanding what it is, a diffusion of the energy, and then transforming it into something else, very lovely way. But it's not something that we're used to doing, I don't think.
they're messengers. The emotions have so much to communicate with us. And if we're not taking time to really honor what that message is, we're missing something really valuable.
Mm.
So very often when we're having these emotions that arise in relationship to in interpersonal or intimate relationships, if we're generating something inside of us that is frustration or aggression or irritation, that very often is an unmet need. And so when we're not identifying with the emotion and we're not going deep into what it's actually calling for, we have a bigger challenge of actually creating harmonious relationships, because then we find it more challenging to communicate what we actually want from the people that we love.
Mm. And I know you're recently married. And did these processes have much to do with, or have they been involved a lot in the development of your relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important for us to create space together to be able to explore. The word we use are triggers. So we would say that they were things that come up within us that create this harmony, and they're related to the behaviors within the other person. And one thing that I'm still working on and seeking to improve is my ability to be vulnerable. Because what I have observed within myself is that when I'm not vulnerable, it's possible to go into a victim mentality and blame the other person for how I'm feeling. And the vulnerability is sometimes scary, especially if we lived or grew up in an environment where we didn't feel safe to express what we were feeling and what we needed. So it would be easier to just close off, to just shut down emotionally and to not feel and to not be in connection. So it's something that has really made an impact on our relationship. Learning how to be vulnerable and just to take that space to really realize what that message is inside of the emotion, that has made a big difference.
Mm. Mm. And what about the way that you guys met? Was it like was manifestation involved?
Absolutely, yeah. So
Yeah.
for about a year and a half, because I've had various experiences in my life and various different approaches to my own sexuality. And so when I was younger, just like seeking different relationships with different people for short periods of time was something that I was cultivating mainly for like dopamine. You meet someone, you have this rush of hormones and chemicals from the intimacy, but really there's not a true connection there. And there's really not a deep resonance with the two of you. You don't really create the environment to cultivate it or to explore it. It's a physical response. And after doing this for a number of years, I started to feel empty and feel like actually it's not creating happiness and it's draining my energy. And that was actually possible because I was able to be in contact with my body, learning how to feel my emotions and to feel the messages that I'm receiving from the body, and seeing this correlation with these empty experiences and realizing actually I'm not happy with this. So it was a year and a half of celibacy where I wasn't opening myself to anyone unless it really felt like there was a deep connection, and that didn't align over that period. So I knew that it needed to feel right in my body, and I needed to create the space to explore the connection. And I left the UK at the end of 2020. I drove from the UK through France to Ibiza, and with this like intention that I was going to meet my partner, because I had this belief that when you live your purpose, that's when you become attractive to someone that is soul aligned with you. And so leaving the UK was me taking a step into my purpose. And like I'd been doing like a year and a half of like meditation and prayer, like writing the characteristics of the woman that I was calling into my life. And it was so beautiful because we were in Ibiza some months into our relationship, and I took my journal off the shelf that I'd been writing in, and I was like one full moon, right? Like lit some candles and I'd written out these characteristics of this woman that I was calling into my life. And it was a description of her. It was like point by point, even things that are like quite nuanced. Cause like I even wrote like loves to dance.
No way.
And she was a professional dancer. It's
No
like
way.
really point by point, every single characteristic and more was fulfilled. Yeah, it was a beautiful confirmation of the power of intention.
That was incredible. And you're sure that's not just because you're like a good-looking, intelligent guy with lots going for you?
I mean, I'm going to give the credit to the manifestation for sure.
Amazing. And so, I hear all different views on this, but, some people say, yeah, write down everything that you want in a partner. The alternative is that you don't know who's going to walk into your life, and to not be too prescriptive about it. Any comments on that?
Well, I was also very open to being surprised,
Mm.
because it wasn't like I was like keeping this checklist in my back pocket and then meeting someone in a party and being like, excuse me, do you do dancing? So it's like being very open to it, because it was just like I met this woman, and as soon as she walked into the room, I was like, there she is. That's her. Like I was that clear.
All right. You just felt it before a word was spoken.
When she walked into the room, it was like a gust of wind entered. And I was like, oh, keep it cool, keep it cool. Whoa. And it was like, yeah, it was like months into it when it was like, oh, look, like we were having a conversation about what I was doing. And I read the list and I was like, oh, wow.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. So you were open to it, but at the same time, you were also calling in the things that you thought you wanted.
Yeah, it had to feel right in my body. And we get neurochemicals that are released when we meet someone and we feel attraction to them, but we can't tell whether it's truly an aligned connection until we explore that. And I think that's why it's really important to cultivate friendship first. Because we can say, oh, it feels really aligned in my body, but that's basically can be lust. We can feel lust in our body.
Mm.
And so in that year and a half, I would meet women that I was attracted to, but I wouldn't jump into it with intimacy, because then I'm just riding all the oxytocin and all of those chemicals that are going to create bonding and attraction, even though fundamentally we're not compatible.
Mm. So even with your wife, even though you felt that she was the one that you developed a friendship.
Yeah. And even when we were in a relationship, for several months, we were not like intimate sexually. So that created the space for us to discover whether this was really something that we were compatible together. I mean, that was her decision, but it was, I think, ultimately helpful.
Mm. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, it's interesting to hear how people meet their partners. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. One of the other topics we touched on at the start is around the idea of being someone who's in the medical world and someone that has ideas that probably don't necessarily fit into the medical box. I resonate with that a little bit, a lot actually. I think medical world has much to offer, of course. It's been wonderful in terms of saving people's lives and increasing life expectancy and all sorts of things like, basic health, preventative health. But it's not so much of a focus on preventative health or deeper emotional health. Like it feels quite blunt at times. And people are increasingly looking outside of medicine or psychiatry to satisfy their deeper needs or to become what I would say like truly holistically healthy. I'm just interested in your experience around that and where do you stand?
Like I really honor the value that we receive from allopathic medicine. It's very focused around pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of connection and funding, and a lot of the policies that we are told to operate from are dictated by those relationships with the pharmaceutical companies. Now, if we understand that pharmaceutical companies are a business, and it's a very lucrative business, they will gain more profits from maintaining and managing a condition versus curing a condition. And I say that without any judgment or condemnation. That's just how I perceive it. So that's why I feel like I need to go out of allopathic medicine to be able to get to the root cause. And so that's why I've felt so much passion, because I started practicing medicine because I wanted to support people to live the best life that they could. And as a result of really understanding how the system works, and then also understanding that there are alternative ways, I found myself more excited about those alternative ways. And I think it's so dependent on the individual, because one person may feel extremely motivated to change their diet, to exercise every day, to meditate, to focus on their emotional health, to optimize their community and their connections, and do everything possible that they could do to optimize their well-being. And another person wouldn't want to be doing that and wouldn't be interested in that at all, but they want to manage their blood pressure. So here you go. There's a tablet that will do that and will support you in reducing the complications of blood pressure, of hypertension on the rest of your organs, and potentially extend your lifespan. Fantastic. And that's up to the individual. However, what I find challenging is that the education isn't available for doctors or patients to understand that there are two options. So that person that would really love to optimize their health and their well-being and understand that it's a multidimensional focus, they don't have the opportunity, because a lot of our colleagues, a lot of the doctors that they're going to see will only give them one of those avenues, because they don't have the own experience or the knowledge of how holistic medicine works. So that's why I still practice 8 hours as a GP, because I want to give patients both of those options and support them regardless of their choice.
What was the moment that you realized that medicine wasn't going to make up 100% of your working life?
COVID had a big impact, because when I was actually traveling in India, I'd taken a few months break, and COVID happened while I was there.
Interesting.
And so I got locked down in the Himalayas, which is a fantastic place to experience a COVID lockdown, because you're alone anyway, right? So I could just go and walk in the mountains and have that freedom. And I came back to the UK after a few weeks, and I really experienced how the healthcare industry had responded to that. And I really didn't feel like that was aligned with my values and my beliefs. And so that for me was a really big moment of reflection. And I decided that was very clear for me that I wouldn't be able to continue to work in that system in that way. I think COVID provided a lot of people with that opportunity for introspection, for really identifying. I mean, for a lot of people, they were locked down in their homes for many months. So that will definitely put a magnifying glass on different aspects of your life. And I had a lot of people that had a big transformation in their lives because of that.
Yeah. Himalaya is such a powerful place. And to go from the stark sort of, I don't know, the power of maybe solo travel in such an amazing place to what sounded like chaos in the UK. Must have been very instrumental.
Yeah, okay. It was a very clear line between the two. And for me personally, I just decided that a life of freedom and also a life out of the cities and exploring different cultures and different ways of living.
Was it the restriction of what you saw when you were back there that really was dissonant for you? Or was it something else about the medical system? I'm just thinking, it turned out that a lot of the first world countries got, disproportionately affected in some ways, despite having what we would have said superior medical systems. What was it about that journey that made you, develop these thoughts around medicine? Yeah.
Well, when I came back, a lot of the primary care services, so like general practice, you're going to see your family doctor, they were all closed. And so I wasn't able to work. So that created some space for me to really reflect. And then I did some work in one of the COVID clinics, seeing patients that were either suspected to have COVID or had been diagnosed with COVID. And I really just felt that environment was very controlling, very limited, very focused, very restrictive. And it was just experiencing what it was like to work in that clinic. And I understand why that was put into place. It just really didn't feel like an environment. That was the only work that I was able to find at that time. And it was just such a contrast to what I wanted to experience in my life. And I just feel like we are receiving signs from life, giving us indications as to where we need to go. So only having the COVID clinic available and the fear and the stress that was associated with that environment and being in that environment, it was an indication to me that this was a message that I needed to move on.
Yeah, I love that. Again, like not a forced way of life, but allowing life to show you where your journey goes. Yeah. And speaking of that, I mean, also thinking about the underpinnings of where your spiritual leanings came from. Were there particular influences in your early life or, even later life that you can really point to that made you think beyond perhaps the traditional education that you had?
There's a really famous book called Autobiography of a Yogi, and it's by someone called Paramahansa Yogananda, and he's someone who's very influential on bringing yoga to the West. In his book, he really talks about some crazy shit. He really writes about stuff that is so far out there that most people would think that this was just a fictional tale. I mean, the interesting serendipity of it was where I got locked down was actually a specific cave that was in the book. It was like the story goes that his teacher's teacher was in this specific place in India, and this enlightened being came to him and gave him the knowledge about this particular practice of yoga that he then taught to his student, and his student taught to Paramahansa Yogananda, and he then took to the West. So I was there in that specific place in the book. And it kind of goes to what we were talking about earlier in the podcast about when you have these confines of what you believe is possible, your reality will then reflect those beliefs. And so I'm reading this book and I'm feeling the power of what it's sharing is possible in there. Not feeling like it's a fictional tale or that this guy is spinning stories to sell his book, but that he's speaking to the magic of the human experience and what is capable for us to access if we choose to.
Yep, sounds pretty important for you. It sounds like exactly what the direction that you've gone in. Yeah.
I've also studied Kriya Yoga, which is a type of yoga that's like focused on energetic cleansing. So it teaches you how to cultivate energy in the body, but also how to release energy in the body, which I found has been really helpful for me also because, at this certain periods of life, it's important for us to understand that we've accumulated loads of emotions and stress and tension in our body and in our nervous system that we need to let go of because we spent years not doing that. And so that was really valuable for me. And as a result of practicing these practices, the sensations in my body really transformed because I was able to release old emotions and I was able to learn how to cultivate self-love and appreciation and acceptance and gratitude. And then there's just so much more energy and information in my body that I'm able to be present with. And so that's the cycle for me, is going into the body, feeling what comes up. And life is a wonderful teacher at providing magnifying glass over what I'm missing and what I need to focus on. And then using some of the practices that we discussed and some of the tools that I've learned over the years to go deeper in that, to get an understanding there and just to have the intention to become more loving into the world.
Yeah, I love that. Manish, I think we're probably coming to the end of the podcast, but I wanted to, first of all, check. That the podcast is called The Self You Seek, and probably a lot of people that are listening are all on their own journeys. I don't even know sometimes whether this should have been called The Self You Seek or The Self You Find or The Self You Are, right? But for people that are on this journey, I think they think that there's probably, on average, something more than what their life is currently offering them. Have you got any, words of wisdom to those people about how to get to the self that they seek or the person they want to be?
Well, 100% that there is more. There's always more to discover within ourselves. And just trusting our capability to be able to access and experience and express more of ourselves. And I don't see that our highest expression is actually something that we need to work towards creating. That the most pure expression of ourselves is actually an undoing. It's a releasing of patterns and programs and constructs that we've created to protect ourselves that we can appraise and let go of. And what lies underneath all of that is who we're meant to be, is our essence and our true self.
Dr. Manish, thank you so much for joining. It's been wonderful. I love listening to you as well. You've got a very, very soothing voice. And if there's anything else you'd like to share with listeners, we'll include the link to that study that you talked about. And anything else that you'd like to share, we're happy to do that in the show notes. But just open the floor for anything else before we finish up.
Yeah, well, I'm so grateful for the invitation. It's been so beautiful to have this conversation with you and also to receive your wisdom.
I appreciate that. Yeah, been lovely.
In January, I'm creating a 4-week group program that's focused on subconscious mind reprogramming through meditation, where each day of the month, I'm sharing a practice that can transform the relationship with the body and with the mind. And that will be a live group container where we connect each week on a live call. And it's also combined with breathwork practices as well. So maybe we could link to the page there. And if anyone feels interested, then it would be wonderful to have you join the course.
Absolutely. I think if they've lasted to the end of the podcast, that's pretty much what we've been talking about the whole time. So I think they'll be very interested. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
happy to do that.
Directly related to that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to The Self You Seek. I hope today's episode brought you one step closer to unlocking your full potential. If you found value in this conversation, I'd love it if you could take a moment to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more people on their journey to self-actualization and mental optimization. And remember, this podcast is just the beginning. It's meant to inspire and empower you, but it's no substitute for personalized advice. If you ever need guidance, always reach out to a licensed healthcare or mental health professional who can support you on your unique path. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next episode.